The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody, this is Thomas here from Osnium Software. I hope everyone's doing well and can hear me through the webinar. Just to make sure everyone is currently muted, if you do have questions, there is a questions pane that you can go ahead and utilize throughout the webinar. For now, as of this moment, if you can see the screen and if you can hear me clearly, please go ahead and just say yes in the questions pane, so I can know that everyone is able to view and hear the webinar clearly. Welcome everybody. We'll go ahead and get started with the Arizona data entry training. Just to give you an idea of what this training is going to consist of, we're going to be going over the software. We're going to go over data entry trainings. We're going to cover shortcuts, tips and tricks, and just to kind of get a refresher on the data entry and how Osnium is to be utilized when you're using the database for proper data entry and record creation. So there's a few components we're going to touch upon. We'll see how much we can get within today's webinar. Hopefully this will be intended for everyone as a refresher. If you do have any questions, I did mention before that there is a questions pane. You can go ahead and put any questions there throughout the webinar as they are relevant to what we may be covering. I will go ahead and attend to the questions or postpone them until near the end of the webinar and address any questions in the questions pane that may have not been answered. If there have been a significant amount of questions, I can go ahead and send out answers via email to everybody that attended the webinar as well. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start off with the client screen that we're on here, or actually is more or less known as the dashboard, which you're able to see different tabs that contain different types of clients depending on whether they're in program or out of program, whether they're in a residential program or if they're in a non-residential program. So I'll go ahead and look with the client and alleged abuser section here. So this is all your clients and alleged abusers all in one list, as everyone may be aware of. The right hand side is a little bit of a preview pane of depending on which client I click on. I can see a snippet of their information to the right hand side over here. Okay, we do have the tabs for active programs. So we can see active residential clients, and then this would be the list here. And then we have another tab for active non-residential clients, which would be the list here. So this is if they have an open program, which means there is no exit or discharge date on that program record. And then we have just overall clients in program with regards to services that they received. So whether they received service in the last 30 days, whether they didn't receive any service in the last 30 days, or within the last 120 days. Okay, so this is the dashboard to give you a little bit of breakout. You may have a significant amount of clients in the database to get a little bit of subset information. That's the purpose of those additional tabs in the dashboard. So I'll go ahead and start off by creating a new client. So I can go ahead and click on the new button from the dashboard area here. Now I have the options for alleged abuser, primary client, and secondary client. So I'll go ahead and click on a primary client in this case. It's going to open up another tab. We have a few fields that are highlighted in red. Those are set to be your required fields in the database. So by default, if I try to click save, I will get a list of errors and or warnings sometimes, depending on the type of validation of what needs to be filled in order for the record to be saved. So we have the initial contact date. With the date fields, I can click on the drop-down arrow to select my date field if I want to use the calendar view. So right now it defaults to today, but I can go ahead and backtrack and select the actual date. If I ever need to clear a date field in the database as well, I can click on the drop-down arrow, and at the very bottom there's a clear button. That will actually clear the date field. Okay, but because it is required, I will set one. I'll put it in for the beginning of the year. The other option that you can do is, if you're just using the keyboard and not necessarily the mouse, is I can start typing the month, date, and year directly in the date field. So if I hit 1, as you can see, went to January. If I hit right on my arrow key, I can now select the day. So let's say it was the 20th. I could type in 20, and then I can go ahead and put in the year. I'll keep the year as it is. But if I wanted to change it, I can go ahead and put in 2016 as an example. Okay, person ID is your automatically generated number, unique number identified in the database. And then you have your legacy ID if you want to keep track of your own internal ID numbers with regards to your clients. So I can use the mouse and click onto the next field here. So I can go ahead and say last name. So let's go ahead and put in last. First name, I'll just say primary, because this will be my primary client. And I can click on middle name. So I'm using my mouse right now to click on each individual field and put in a value. The other option is to go a little bit faster during your data entry, and not necessarily use the mouse, but use the keyboard. You can go ahead and tab through each of the fields in the database. So as you can see, as I'm tabbing through right now, I'm on reservation. And the way to know that I'm on reservation is that there's actually a little bit of a darker, or it's actually highlighted all the way around to let me know which field I'm currently on. So as you can see, as I tab now, I'm on tribe, primary language. That's me using the tab button on my keyboard. If I want to go back a field, if I went one too many, I want to go back to maybe gender, I can hold shift on my keyboard, and then I can go ahead and hit tab. So that actually makes me navigate through the software in reverse by holding down the shift button. Okay, and now you can see I am back onto last name. Okay. So again, I could go ahead here. Date of birth, just a refresher on how the date of birth field works. If you just know the age, for example, if I know they're 36, I can type in 36. Once I hit tab or I move up, click on another data element, okay, the date of birth will get automatically calculated based off of their age. So the year gets calculated, so it's 1982, but because I didn't actually put in a date of birth, it takes today's month and day as the default values, and then the date of birth estimated checkbox gets checked off automatically. Okay, vice versa. Okay, if I want to clear it, go down to my date field, hit clear. I'll reset it to 0, I'll uncheck my date of birth. If I know the date of birth, I can go ahead and just type it in similarly to the way I did with the initial contact date. So they were born September 1st, 1984. Once I hit tab, the age will get automatically calculated. Date of birth is not estimated because I actually put in the entire date of birth. Okay, so going through that again, I can hit tab, tab, tab. Now I'm on my gender field. So again, I could utilize my mouse by clicking on the drop-down arrow and then selecting my option here. So I can select female. If I want to clear a drop-down, I hit the little X beside that drop-down arrow. That will actually clear my value here. Okay. Vice versa, if I want to use keyboard shortcuts, since I'm highlighted on gender, that's my currently active field, I can hit the space bar on my keyboard, and then I can use my up and down arrow keys to select the value. Once I select the value, I can go ahead and hit enter, and then that will select the value that I want for my gender field. So again, I can click tab, hit the space bar to open up the drop down, select an option, hit enter. So once you go ahead and start doing your data entry, this does get a little bit quicker once you get the hang of the quick keyboard shortcuts. So again, spacebar, open up my drop down, select my value, enter, tab to the next option, etc. Now this list here is a little bit longer. Okay, so I can see there's quite a few options here. One thing I can do actually is at the bottom of every list, there's a little bit of a bar at the bottom, which is your summaries. Nothing is there by default, but what I can do is if I right click on that, I can go ahead and select count. So that will just give me a number of how many data options I have here. So it's actually 20 options for reservation. Okay. So again, if I go into my dropdown, it's not a required field. I can use my up and down arrow keys to navigate. The other option that I have is if I know which value I'm looking for. Okay, so if I'm looking for salt river, I can start typing in my value. So I do SAL. Okay, it will jump down to the first match that it finds. So instead of having to quickly click down, 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 I can go ahead and just start typing in my value if the list is long, and we'll jump to the very first one that matches it. Okay, so it's the Salt River. I can go ahead and select that. Okay, tab, enter to select, tab, spacebar, enter to select. The only difference in a few of the data elements is when you get down to limited English proficiency and veteran. Because these are hard-coded values, the spacebar doesn't work. It only works for drop-downs. These are called what we define as enumerations because they're hard-coded. I can just go ahead and toggle with my up and down arrow keys right away. It doesn't necessarily have to open up the drop-down. For limited English proficiency and veteran, I can go ahead and just use my up and down arrow keys. I don't need to select enter. It changes it on the spot because there has to be some sort of value. It cannot be empty. West County, I hit my space bar. Again, if I type in NAV, we'll jump to the very first option that matches that criteria. Don't have to do just 3. I could keep typing as much as I want to be more specific. Hit enter. Okay. So from here, again, I'm under custody of, so there's a little bit of quick data entry here. Phone numbers. Okay, so if I go ahead and do a phone number here, I can go ahead and type in work, home, cell, etc. So if I go ahead and start typing, it will automatically put in the phone number mask. If there's an extension, I just keep typing and then the extension will follow. I can specify whether it's safe to call or safe to leave the message. One thing that you notice, so if they also have a cell phone, I'll go ahead and put a cell phone number there. What happens on the very first field that I type in, it actually gets defaulted to their primary. So because I put in their work phone first, work is set to be my primary phone number, and not the cell phone. And what that means is when the primary is set to work, if I click OK, the phone number that shows up in this field here is the one that was set to primary. So because my primary was work, it's showing me my work phone number, which is the one with the extension. If I open up my phone number field and I change my primary to be cell, and I click OK, then the phone number that shows up on their profile from their list of phone numbers will be their cell phone. Okay. Also, the last thing is for the restrictions apply. So if I put in a message here, it could be anything, it doesn't really matter. As long as something is typed in here, it will show that restrictions apply. Okay, so if I say don't call the cell phone after 5 p.m., as soon as I type something in, the restrictions shows up that the restrictions apply. You don't want to open that up and check what the restrictions are prior to making any phone call. Okay, so address field, again, if I click on the 3 dots, it does open up my address field. You can put in the street, zip code, street, city, county, state, and country. One feature is if you do put in the zip code will go ahead and populate the city and the state and the country value. Okay, so if I go ahead and type in the zip code, city is Phoenix, county got pulled in earlier from my county option, then I have my state and then my country. So that's by putting in the zip code. Okay, then I can specify urban and rural. If there's an email address, okay, once I go ahead and type that in, it does give me the format. So then if I click on it, it will open up an open email. And we have emergency contact information, which works similarly the same. So I'll go ahead and save my client. Okay, I have one more validation. Veteran must not be empty when the person is over the age of 18. So then it will show me that one. I will go ahead and say no. I'll go ahead and click save. Okay, so now I've created my primary client. Good use of habit is always make sure you're saving as you're doing your data entry, just in case computer shuts off, power outage, you don't lose any information. The other thing that I usually commonly do is I like to hit the refresh button after I'm doing a significant amount of data entry, just to make sure what I'm looking at is the most up-to-date information. So if I hit refresh, also some fields that may be calculated in the back end will happen once you refresh the screen. So right now there's no name here, but if I hit refresh, okay, so that's one thing, it updates the profile, puts in the name, is just a good habit to get into. F5 is also the shortcut for refresh. Okay, so then we have our tabs at the bottom for mostly our historical information where we're providing services, enrolling them into programs, keeping track of victimizations, etc. General information is ultimately the expansion of their profile, where we have primary advocate, how they were referred, a little bit of education and immigration information, and special classifications. So I won't go through all of this too much because the concept is the same what I just covered earlier. But again, these are drop downs that you can search through as well. The only thing that I will cover is this one here for referral source. Okay, now this one, as you can see, there's about 41 options here. The way it's set up right now is to have a find panel already built in. So when I clicked on my gender, I don't have a find panel, but I can start typing in to reach my first option that I want. However, within the primary referral source, I get a find panel. So if I'm looking for a school, one thing is I can scroll down and look for school. The other option is I can start typing SCHO, and then I can hit search, and then it'll bring up anything that matches SCHO. Okay, so if I start putting RES, and I hit search, I get everything that's ultimately starts with RES, which is all my residential project options here. Okay. Save my profile. I can hit save, or I can hit Control S on my keyboard to quickly save. Okay, from here, under special classifications, I click on add. This is a check all that applies. So if I want to select options that are more than one without having just to select one, click OK, click add, select the second one. Okay, I can go ahead and click on add, hold down my control button on the bottom left corner of the keyboard, and I can do a multi-select. Now let's say I selected homeless by accident, still holding control, I can unclick and uncheck homeless. So the ones that are highlighted are the ones that are going to get added in. From here, I can click on OK, and then my list is over here. Again, below I can see there's that group further summary. If I want to see how many values I have there, I can right click and then go ahead and say count. Okay, so I have 4. If I put 1 in by accident, or 2, so let's say mental health and deaf or hard of hearing should not be there, I can multi-select them as well. Hit remove. It's going to ask me if I want to unlink those. I'm going to say yes, take them out of that collection of options. Now I'm down to my 2 options here. Okay, from here I can hit Control S, save my client, and then I can go ahead and continue with my data entry. So I'm going to hit refresh one more time. One of the options here, so we have family members. So if I want to keep track of the family members or who's part of the family, in the case of this example where I have my primary client, I can go ahead and click on the new button and select, do I want to create a secondary or a primary client? Okay, so in this case, let's say I want to create a secondary client. I'll click on the secondary option. Okay, we'll open up another tab at the top. Again, same idea. I'll just go ahead and fill in. This is my secondary. Say they were 8 years old. I'm just going to do a little bit of quick options here. Just setting all the required fields. I believe if I hit save. Okay, so I put in all at least the minimal information I need to save a secondary client in this case. Okay, otherwise the format of everything stays the same. Okay, so from here I can hit save and close. Then I have my secondary client. Okay, and then I have my primary client here. If there's somebody else as well, I can go ahead and create new. And if there's also let's say a primary client, I could do the same thing here. So what happened was, if you notice, I did get, because I started typing in the same first name and the same last name of my primary client, I was going to use primary 2 as my first name. But because I started typing in primary and then their last name and their first name is the same, I get what we call our duplicate watcher, which is notifying me that a client already exists in the database with the same first name and last name. Now, there are cases where the client will exist with the same first name and last name, so it does show you which record it is and a little bit of information. So if the date of birth is different, it doesn't match what I'm looking at here, so even though they're first name and last name, I'm going to hit cancel. If I click OK, it's actually just going to pop up that client so I don't have to create them again. Okay, so I'll go ahead and click cancel, so I'll continue doing my data entry. Sorry. Okay, so I'll say primary 2. And then I'll fill in the fields here. I still need to fill in following options, hit save, and then save and close. Okay, so now I have my primary, and then I have part of my family members are the following primary number 2 and my actual secondary client. Okay, so then we have alleged abusers as well. If you want to link an abuser to your client profile, this is what the tab is ultimately used for. However, there's a little bit of confusion sometimes when it comes to, well, they are the abuser, but I want to specify also their relationship. You can do that through here, but primarily where that is actually captured is in the victimization. Okay, so to keep track of the abuser and the victimization is within this record here. So if I click on a new victimization, so I have my primary client and they're coming into shelter or coming into a program because of some sort of victimization they experienced, I need to specify that here. And then this is where I can create who the abuser was and then the relationship between the abuser and my primary client in this case. So from here, I can go ahead and fill in all the necessary information. I have my victimization types prefixed with DV, other, or SV. Okay. So I'll select DV, domestic and/or family violence. Now, under my primary abuser, if I click on my drop down here, I'll get a list of abusers. Sometimes if the list gets quite lengthy, you might just get a find panel, and then you need to start typing in the name that you might be looking for. Okay, so if they exist in the database, I can go ahead and select them from here. Okay, if not, I can click on the new button here. And I can go ahead and put in an abuser profile. Okay, so nothing is required here, so I can just go ahead and put in all the information I have. On the right hand side, you have no image data. What that actually allows you to do is you can upload an image. So if I click right click and I click on load, it'll open up an Explorer window where I could upload an image if I have an image of the alleged abuser. Okay, so I'll go ahead and hit save and close. So now a bad guy is in the database under alleged abusers and associated to my victimization. And now I can specify what the relationship was. So whether they're spouse, parent, ex-spouse, etc. Okay, and then I can put in my locations. If there was something else that happened within that domestic and/or family violence within the same victimization, under other victimization types is where I can specify. Okay, so whether it was considered sexual violence or under the other category, I can do a multi-select in this selection here. Okay, I can click on OK. Okay, so then we have the additional legal information here regarding the client and the batterer. These are all checkboxes that you can go ahead and select. Okay, when it comes to checkboxes, I didn't mention quick data entry. So as I'm going here, I can tab through all my options. Within collections where it's add and remove, you do have to click on add and remove with the mouse. There's no keyboard shortcut necessary to open those. When I get to my checkboxes, similar how the spacebar opened up the dropdown, the spacebar also toggles checked or unchecked. So I can quickly tab through. And then once I get to the specific one I want to select, I can just go ahead and hit the spacebar. If I want to deselect it, I can hit the spacebar again to deselect. So once I've done that, I can go ahead and hit save and close. Okay, so then there's my victimization record, and then you have your main victimization on the left-hand side. Okay, now just to do a little bit of a recap when it comes to the victimization section. So right now they have one victimization. Okay, so I go back to here and I take my date of victimization. Let's say I put it back to 2014 as an example. Okay, so I've been working with this client. I'm doing their data entry. Obviously, I would have enrolled them in a program and then provide them services. If they have another victimization, so let's say now I would do in 2018, let's say today. Okay, let's say there was sexual violence for adult sexual assault. Could be the same or a different abuser profile. That's from that list here. Okay, so what's happening now is when I have two victimization records, I created a new one. So I have my original one, which was I dated back to 2014. And I have the one that happened today that I put into the database. Right now, my main victimization, which is over here, is set to the one back in 2014. So what I'd want to do is if they're now receiving service or getting into a program regarding the new or the most recent victimization, I would want to update that to select the one that's 2018. Okay, so I want to update my main victimization. And then from here, I can go ahead and hit save or Control S on my keyboard. Okay. So from here, when I'm going down, I need to enroll them into a program before I enter them into a service. There's a validation rule that if you do provide a service and they're not enrolled in a program at that time, it will let you know. You can still create it, but there will be a validation warning that will prompt you to let you know that you're providing a service, that it's not within a time frame when they're enrolled in a program. So if I need to put them into a program, I can go under my program tab here, click on the new button. Okay, so that's my client. And then I'm just going to backdate it to the beginning of the month. And then for program type, I can go ahead and select one of the following options. Okay, so if they're going to be receiving non-residential services, I put them in a non-residential program. If they're going to shelter, I can select emergency shelter or one of the other options below. I will go ahead and select emergency shelter for this example. I can specify the location. There's more than one. Okay, so then we have the TANF eligible, total number of children under 18, and then for pet is accompanying the victim as well. I do need to fill in the income information, so if I try to hit save now, if there isn't any income information, I want to check that, and then I can go ahead and save the record. If there is, I need to put in a value here. So right now, their intake date is on the 1st. If I want to link someone who came into emergency shelter as well from one of their family members, okay, that's using this section here in the middle under the household information. Okay, so if my primary client that I'm working with right now is going to be considered the head of the household, and then they have a child and I want to put in the child, under the associates, stays, and families, I want to click on the new to create a new record for a program. And then what I want to do is under my client field, I want to be able to select one of the family members or the child. Okay, now what you get here is you get a person list. So this is all people in the database. By default, because the list is so great, it doesn't show anybody, it just shows a find panel. We can look at improving that to create a default that actually shows all the clients at once. But if there's a significant amount of clients, you may not need to see everyone, but there is a possibility of defaulting this list to show everybody. Okay, so if I want to see everybody without doing a specific filter yet or find, I can just hit search without putting anything in the find panel. Then I'll get everybody in my database. Again, I can right click again and say count just to see a count of records. So there's 88. Okay. So if I want to type in, I'm going to look for secondary. I'll hit search. Okay, so there's this one here. I'm going to select my secondary client that I entered into the database. I'm going to take the intake date. I need to put it to be the same because since I backdated, so it's going to be 6/1. And then I can go ahead and select the same program type. For purpose, I'll say no income. And then what I can do is save and close. Okay, if I hit save, okay, it will keep me on the same record. If I hit save and close out of the record. Okay, and then I can go ahead and hit save and close. Now I need to keep going back. I saved the stay records or the program records, and then I need to save the client profile at the end. Okay, I'll hit refresh. Okay. And then so I have my record here. So just to make sure, I created the new record here. My apologies for that one. I actually wanted to do it through the add button because what I did by creating the new button created a new record, but it didn't link them. I need to create the linking, I have to utilize the add button. Okay, so if I created my record here and I want to get my secondary, I actually have to click on the add button. If I click search, this gives me a list of all program records right now that are in the database. Now I did create my secondary already. So if I type in, I look for my secondary. Okay, so there's my last secondary. They already exist. They weren't linked yet. I created a new value or new program enrollment, but I haven't linked them. So to link them, I need to click on the add button. It will show me their record. Now that they're in here under the associated stays, they are actually linked together. So this is considered as a household now that they came into shelter together. Okay, so under my associate stays and family members. So that way, if I actually go under my family member and I go under my secondary client here, there's the program enrollment. So they're in emergency shelter. Now to know who's part of it, because I know that they are considered a family member and they're not the head of household, because I can see the head of household value here, so last primary, this person here is actually the head of household. That's how I know they're linked together. If it's a standalone record and there's no head of household and there's no associate stays, that means they are currently in shelter on their own. Okay. So I can go ahead and just close out of here. This is my secondary and close out of here. So now that I have my initial primary client, they have a victimization, in this case, sexual violence, adult sexual assault. I have enrolled them into the program of emergency shelter as of the beginning of the month. Now, if I go down to my services, I can keep track of all the services I provide to them. So there's a few things when it comes down to the services, which I'll show you with regards to a little bit of the data entry. So if I click on the new button here, it will open up my new service record. So clients in this service, I can see that's my client here. Service provided, if I click on the drop down, they're broken down to my categories. So if I'm providing, for example, personal advocacy or accompaniment, I can expand that category here. And I can select the appropriate option within my service list here. Okay, a recent change that was updated was we did provide services, whether they were case management or legal advocacy, just to differentiate between the two. So I can select my option here. I can put that to be the second, 2:30, and then I can select my duration hours and how long I provided that service. Okay. That's all I need to do as of right now. It gets defaulted to the type being that they were fully served and is face-to-face as the method of contact. You can change those if you wish, if those done over the phone or via email. So services that you provide over a phone to a client are not necessarily done through the call screen or the call module in the database. You still want to log it in as a service, but say that the method of contact, the way you were providing the service, was done via the phone, or if you did it via email or web chat, etc. So I can go ahead and select face-to-face. I'll keep it as is. Okay, so I could save the record, and then I can go ahead and hit save and close. Okay, now I want to make sure I want to save the client. So every time I'm creating records underneath a client, I have to save the client here at the end. When the save button is clicked and everything is most up to date and nothing has been changed, you'll see that the save button is actually grayed out. The moment I do a change, whether it's changing a dropdown or actually adding in a new record, the save button becomes enabled, meaning you have updated the record or changed something in the record. So you always want to make sure you save the client at the end. If you're doing services entry in a little bit of a bulk format, I can click, if I click on the new button here, and let's say I'm doing information and referral. So I provide a referral to other victim service programs. Okay, maybe that was done talking about that for a quarter of an hour, so I could leave at 0.25. To stay on the same screen, if I did it on the same day, okay, I can utilize the save and copy feature. So let's say I also had, if you're utilizing these values here, the service location, the contract was all the same. I can go ahead and click save. Now if I hit save and new, what that will do is it will create a brand new record with keeping me on the screen. Okay, so save and new, it'll keep me on the screen, and I can go ahead and select my next option, information referral. Select my option, put in my time again. So you could utilize the save and new button to keep yourself on the same screen without having to close out and open up a new service all the time. Okay. So that's primarily everything with the service. You have your notes to the bottom center here. You have your staff members on the right-hand side. It defaults to who you're currently logged into right now. If I need to change it, I can go ahead and remove. And then I can click on add. Again, it shows up blank because the list is quite lengthy. We can look at improving that to show the default list right away, so you don't always have to click on the search panel. In this case, in our test database, there's quite a few options here, so that's why that happens. So I can go ahead and select a different staff member and then change that as well. Then on the other side, there's another tab beside the staff, which is the topics. If I click on the add button, these are topics that you may have talked about. In this case, this is regarding legal problems presented. So I can do a multi-select here, holding the control key again, clicking on OK, hitting save. Okay, there is some information regarding transportation and transportation versus voucher and tickets. There has been a little bit of talk about this, whether this is being utilized or not. I know some reports we're looking at that at some point, but we've updated them to just look at whether transportation was done as a service. Okay, so this would be more for internal knowledge. Okay. The other thing, if you notice, I did create the service using the save and new button. There's an option here to the right that says copy. What that does is if you want to copy the record, this saves up a little bit on data entry depending on how much you've created on the record and you don't want to re-enter everything again. Okay, so if let's say I select a contract and a service location, they were served. What I can do is if I save the record, the copy button becomes enabled. If I click copy, what that actually does, it creates a duplicate record. Okay, and then all I need to do if I provided maybe a same service or a different service is I just need to update maybe that I gave information about the criminal justice process. Okay, and if I want to do another one, save, copy, and again another referral about victim rights, save, save and close. So the copy feature actually copies the entire record, so I didn't have to re-enter the contract. I didn't have to enter the service location again. It just literally makes a copy, and you just change the field you need to change to log the service. So I entered pretty much all 4 information referrals staying on that one screen, utilizing either the save and new or the save and copy feature. So then we have victimizations, which we covered. Calls, this shows up calls because we have a call module from the main menu. I'll come back to calls in a second, but on the calls there's a field called existing client where you can link a call to a client and they will show up over here. Okay, so then I have financial assistance. If I need to keep track of any of that, I can go ahead and put in the date. Again, I could type in month, day, and year. If there's an end date, you can put an end date. If there isn't, you just put when it was provided. You can put in the value, and then you would have your financial assistance options here. Okay. Again, if I'm doing multiple data entries, I can use save and new. Let's say then I give it on the 5th, and then I would select my option here. Okay. Keyboard shortcuts as well. Control S will save the record. If I want to save and close, it's actually Control and Enter will save and close the record. Okay, so I can save the client, Control S, or hitting the mouse on the save button. Okay. Referrals, if you want to keep track of the specific referrals, that is done through this option here. Let me just make it a little smaller. Again, we get the one because there's a significant option. It shows everything at once by default, and you do have the find panel. So if I'm looking for housing, I could type HOS, hit enter, and then I have my two options actually fit that category of clothing and household items or housing. Using my up or down arrow keys, I can click enter, select my option. Okay, save and new if I want to create another one, save and new. Childcare, save and close, quickly created 2 records under referral. Okay, again, saving the client at the end just to make sure the whole profile has been saved. Then we have a section for release of information. As you can see, the data entry is pretty consistent, the same. You have the save and new buttons. You have a few options for text fields and drop downs. So I won't go through this in too much detail as it follows all the other record creations as well. And then we have a section for pre and post tests, which are the surveys. If I do my pre and post test here, this actually links it to the client. So if I do a counseling survey in this example, or if I do a post services test, sorry, because it's linked to a client. When I click on OK, it will open up the survey and it will populate the client here, linking this survey or pre or post test to the client. I could fill out the options. Again, drop downs here follow the same format with shortcuts. So I can hit my option, tab, spacebar to open, 3, tab, space. Okay, also if I know the answer is 5, I can just hit 5, it will jump straight to it. Tab, spacebar, 3, will go straight to somewhat. Tab, space, 1, will go straight to no. Okay, so then you can utilize the keyboard shortcuts there. Okay, so I can hit save and close. Once it's linked here, it's also linked now to the client profile. It's not an anonymous one. Okay, saving the client in the end. We have a section for file attachments if you want to upload copies of whether it is a release of information, maybe a protection or restraining order. You can utilize this section here. With the attachments, if you click on the 3 dots, it will open up an open Windows Explorer where you can go ahead and select what you want to upload. When you upload a file attachment, it does actually store it in the database. So if it is a PDF file, it will get stored in the database. Okay. We'll go ahead and close that. Okay. So that's primarily everything to do with the data entry. The only thing that I want to cover or kind of refresh is we have this section for alleged abusers here, which allows you to kind of just link if any of the abusers that they may have had a contact with or were part of a victimization, you can put them in here. But the relationship to the abuser is stored within the victimization record primarily. Okay. So that's what that is done regarding this. So if I want to add, I can click on add. And then there's that guy bad that I entered earlier. Select him, save. Okay, so I could put more than one here, but the relationship is done within the victimization section. So if I open up Guy Bad from here, because he's under, if I scroll this, make this a little bit smaller here, because he's under the alleged abusers tab, when I open up his profile, related clients is taken from who he's related to, so then that's my primary client here. Okay. We can look at doing a little bit of an update. I know there was an update done where we can also show the related victimizations now. So if they're actually stored and linked on the victimization record, so Guy Bad and John Jones, if I open up their profiles, I can see which victimizations they're actually related to as well, not just the client, but the actual victimization record. So there are ways that we can go ahead and look at adding in those little features that might help with your data entry, kind of the way your data is stored and easy access to one record to another. Okay. So again, I have my primary, I have my family members here, I have her enrolled in a program. They receive the following services here. I can use the save or save and copy or save and new to do quick service data entry. All the other tabs here are just for additional information, whether it's financial assistance referrals. Okay. So if I save and close here, okay, so then I'm back to my client list. Okay, just in case, sometimes what happens is it is tab based, so similar to Google Chrome or your web browser where there's opens up multiple tabs. It is pretty much tab based when you open up multiple client records. Sometimes you might close the last tab and you end up at a screen like this. It's not necessarily that the software broke, it's just it's not displaying anything because we closed all the tabs. So to bring that dashboard back, if I click on the main menu, I just need to click on the Arizona dashboard here. And then that will bring my Arizona dashboard with the following subcategories of active program tabs and clients and program tabs that I had earlier. Yeah. So if I go to my main menu, I did mention we had the call. So under the call section here, I see all my call records. On the right-hand side is my little snippet or preview pane. I can click on new call to create a new call record. I have my duration of the call, who took the call type, again, utilizing my keyboard, space to open up drop downs, up and down arrows to select my option, enter to select the value. Okay. Now, if their client is an existing client, that's what this feature here or drop down is used for. I can go here, get all my clients. I can hit search to get everybody. But otherwise, I can go ahead and type in primary. And then I have my primary client here. And then what happens is this call record is going to get linked to my primary client, or that calls tab under their profile. Because I select an existing client here and we already have their information on their profile, the following fields below get disabled once you move on to the next field. Okay. So I'm going to close off of this here. I'll go ahead and save the changes. I do need to have a call reason, so there's a validation error. I could select more than one. Hit save. And then save and close. Okay. From here, I'm going to go over a few other options here just to kind of manage your data and how you're kind of looking if you need to pull up records, etc. So if I go down to my lists and I hover over client details allows me to see all my raw data in the database, whether it's my non-residential programs, so that would be anything clients enroll in non-residential program. Residential programs would be all programs of transitional housing, hotel, motel, or the emergency shelter program. That would show me a list of all those. Services will show me all services in the database. Victimizations will show me all victimizations in the database. So from here, if I click on services, okay, it will give me a list of all service records in the database. Okay. What I can do from here, I do have my summary panel that I mentioned earlier. So I have a count already on one of the columns that says 193 of my total records. If I have duration in hours, I can actually do a sum, and that will give me a summation at the very bottom. Okay. From these list views, you can do a little bit of filtering as well. So if I want to filter by a particular category, I can open up my little filter or funnel at the top right-hand corner of every column. Okay, and then I can go ahead and select a specific category. So if I want to see all my emotional support and safety services, that shows up in the list here. And then I can go ahead and see all my records. The actual filter is actually on the bottom left-hand corner in red. And what I can do from here is I can keep the filter and check off the actual filter itself. So as you can see, it goes from 193 to 44. Okay, so I could toggle the filter on and off. If I want to get rid of the filter entirely, I just hit the X at the bottom left-hand corner, and that closes it off. Okay, so that's within the services section. One thing that you'll notice is within the non-residential, there is a checkbox here that specifies non-residential service. So it was just a reminder that when you're entering a non-residential service, that the non-residential box needs to be checked off, just to make sure the reports that you have get filtered accordingly and the numbers get into the correct category. Okay. I can also do a little bit of date filters as well. So I have quite a few options here with all my records. Within my date filters, under the specific date periods, I can change that and actually go to an option called between. So if I select my between option, then I can go ahead and select my start date and my end date. Similar to when you're doing reports, I'm just doing this all through the list view. Okay. So if I want to see, I know I have some in 2020. So if I do 1/1 and select 2020. Okay, so I'm getting all my services between 1/1 and 2020, and then moving forward. So I could select my end time, and then 2020. So now I'm getting all my services between January 1st of 2020 and February 25th of 2020, which is my filter at the bottom left-hand corner. So within the list views, if there is a date, you can use the filtering to determine your time frame that way as well. Okay, and then I can go ahead and close that off. So through my options here under my list, under my client details, if I want to see all my residential programs, I can click on that and I can see all my residential program records as well. Again, lists, client details, same would apply for victimizations. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just to give you an idea, this is where you can see all your records that you have in the database. These lists are exportable to Excel. So if I right click, I do show export to, and I can select an XLS or CSV file and then export this list into Excel. And if you're very Excel savvy or like to do some filtering, you can go ahead and utilize the Excel. The other option is we have under lists, we have scheduler events. So this is where I can add my administrative time if I'm doing any outreach. This is where I can go ahead and select those records. So right now I did under outreach, shows me a preview of all the records I have so far. I click on the new button and select outreach, and then this will open up new outreach records. So I can select what type of outreach I was providing. So community awareness, community meeting, information material, it was a training. So I can select one of these options here, select the county, time of the event and date of the event and the duration and how many prep hours were involved. Okay, so I can go ahead and say it was 2 hours as an example. Then you have your audience types. So under my audience types, when I click on the new button, this will allow me to select an audience from a category. So if I go under education, I can say middle and high school students. And then under the count, I can provide the number that there were. So I can hit save, keep me on the same screen. If I want to do, if there was more than one type of audience, I can hit save and new. That way I don't have to close off of this screen. And then maybe it was also a combination of university and college students. I can put in 10 and then I could hit save and close. So now I can see under my audience types, I had 20 high school students and then 10 university or college students. Okay, and then topics is a check all that apply. So I can expand these categories, hold my control key and do a multi-select. Hit enter to close it off. And then I need to select my staff members. If there was more than one potentially facilitating the presentation, I can add them all in using the check all that apply. Okay, and save and close my record. Now I've done the outreach record through the main menu under lists and scheduler events. The other option that I have is I can utilize the scheduler itself. So if I click on the scheduler, and if let's say today was Monday and I did a training from 9 in the morning till 12, I can hold, click, and drag my time slot. Okay, so now I selected from 9 till 12 is what I want to do. I can right click, say new, and I can say outreach, or maybe it was administrative time. So I can click on outreach here. And the only thing that does is it actually takes my date. My time is 9 a.m. and then because I was till 12, it puts my duration at 3 hours. So by me already selecting the time slot, I don't have to go through and enter all that manually. I could just do it through the dragging and dragging and selecting the option of what type of record I want to select. Okay. So I can close off all my tabs here. Okay, this other section here, this will be more or less for those that are more or less on the administrative side to manage your staff accounts and their roles. So to create staff will be done through utilizing the staff section and then creating a new staff member. So just a few other things. I know I've been clicking on the main menu and then you might be seeing a few other options here that you may not necessarily have as of right now. There is, you see there's task alerts and then dashboards as well. This was something that was recently done in an update of our latest version of the database, where we're able to select task alerts or sometimes like a reminder. So if I need to maybe follow up with a client, so if I open up a client here, I can create a task for Sarah here in this example. And then what I can do is I can select a little bit of a subject, what it's regarding. I can say follow up. I can say when that task needs to be done. Okay, and then I can go ahead and specify the time. And then I can select the reminder time of when I want it to remind me. So maybe 30 minutes prior to 4 o'clock, 1 hour. And then I can select the staff members. So if the staff members log into the database and then at 3 o'clock, it will pop up on the screen telling them a little bit of a reminder that they need to follow up. And then you could go ahead and put in the description of what it is. So that's a little bit of a task alert that was recently put in, if you were wondering what that is. Okay, so if I do that, this is kind of what it would look like. It would pop up, okay, because it actually is 3 o'clock right now in our time. So it actually popped up the moment I created it, saying at 3 o'clock is when I need to do it, and I need to do it for Sarah. So then I have the option to snooze it if I wanted to remind me again in 10 minutes. I could dismiss it, or if I want to already work with Sarah, if I'm not on Sarah's profile, I would click Open Object Notification, and that will actually open up my client, and then I can go ahead and do data entry, give them a call, etc. Okay, and then dashboards is also the ability to create dashboards. There's none currently in this database, but just to give you an idea, we are able to create a little bit of dashboards, whether it's regarding services, program enrollments, calls, etc. So that covers pretty much a lot of the data entry training. I covered quite a few shortcuts with the keyword to hopefully improve if you're doing a lot of data entry as well, whether it's using Control S to save records, Control Enter to save and close a record, clicking on Tab to navigate through multiple fields within the database, using the spacebar to open up drop downs, up and down arrow keys to select the value, and hitting enter to actually select the value that you want. Okay, Shift Tab, just as a reminder, makes you go in reverse if you want to go ahead and go back a few fields. And then just to make sure every time you do any changes to your clients, please make sure to always save the clients at the end. One good practice is to make sure not to have too many clients open at the same time. It's a lot easier when you have minimal tabs or clients open for your workflow process to make sure nothing is being missed or not being saved potentially. Okay. So what I will do is I'll leave the questions pane open if anybody wants me to cover something, or if we want to do a little bit of a discussion. If anyone has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer regarding any questions regarding doing a little bit of data entry, tips and tricks, or any kind of workflow that you have questions on. Okay, so if you do have any questions, please go ahead and let me know by utilizing the questions pane, or you can raise your hand and I can look at unmuting you as well if you'd want to, if it'd be easier to just talk it out via small conversation and maybe do a recap or walkthrough regarding something. Well, thank you everybody for attending, and thank you for participating in the data entry webinar, going over all the data entry tips and tricks and shortcuts, and a little bit of explanation of how everything is stored in the database. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to let me know. You can go ahead and send an email as well. Our support team is also available to help out with any issues you may have, whether it's connection issues, record issues, with anything that you may not seem in alignment of what you would expect to actually have in the database when you're doing your data entry. If something went missing, if something didn't save, or a report isn't working accordingly. Just a reminder, those new Flex reports have been or should be available as well for you guys to utilize as well to get the more filtering and the additional parameters and the table breakouts of unique counts of clients, services, and contacts all together. So if you do have any question, if you don't have those Flex reports yet, you can go ahead and send an email to myself, or Jesse also has the link for the file to download all of those. Other than that, thank you for attending, and then we will talk soon. Have a great rest of the day.